Beyond Limits. Expanding minds. Opening hearts. Connecting into oneness.
So this is Lee Wallach from the Agape Spiritual Center in Dallas, Texas, and I'm Larry DeRusser from the Center for Spiritual Living in St. Louis, Missouri, and we want to talk about habitual thinking and a whole variety of other things. And I know, Lee, you went to see Joe Dispenza, or you took one of his courses or something.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, what did you think of that?
Well, Joe he's approaching something very simple, and that our habits create. And he uses it from a scientific perspective where he talks about the neurons and the neural pathways and how they're rewired and how they become hardwired as you think a thought over and over and over and over again. It's like you're on the top of a hill and you roll a bowling ball down, and if you keep rolling it down that same path, it forms a groove, and so it'll never deviate. Well, the mind does the same thing. And he says, in order to change your life, you have to roll a bowling ball and create a new groove. Mm-hmm. And so he uses science to do that. He also, in his advanced workshops, he puts, measurement tools on your head, and he measures your brain waves, and he takes a picture of your brain, lights it up, and then when you're done with the 4 or 5 days, he shows what meditation or what changing your habits of thinking does. Mm-hmm. So it's something that's been done for thousands and thousands of years, but Joe's applying today's science and he's marketing it that way.
Right, which, Ernest Holmes marketed in his day was the science of spirituality.
Yep.
And even he quotes Einstein in several places about spirituality. But it's also, Joe Dispenza is also working off of the original 2004 What the Bleep movie. What the Bleep Do We Know? And in fact, his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, is really a recapitulation of that movie, broken down piece by piece. And then at the end, he does all the different meditations. I noticed that the way he does his meditations is interesting because he starts off by doing what I call an induction process, which is a hypnotic trance process to move you into, as opposed to typical meditation, which is just relax yourself, etc. Right? Because you're a TM, and the difference between that and what he does is distinct.
And I really don't believe I would call what he does meditation. He calls it that, but I call it, he's got this music in the background, it's got certain frequencies, and then he's there and he says, "You're going deeper." And he's modulating his voice, getting you to step outside your body and do all this stuff. That's more of a visualization, a guided imagery, as opposed to what I call meditation.
Yeah, it's actually trance work, because that's what they do in trance work is they start speaking in a monotone and then they move it according to cadence and they take you down. So it's different than traditional meditation. Although there's so many different forms of meditation, I guess you could call anything meditation at some point. But I know the one Mary Jean and I have been doing is Rupert Spira. We're in his 5-day workshop. And he says, meditation is who you are. Now, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Because he says
take that
meditation
further.
is who you are, meaning that part of you that is aware of what's going on, that knows what's going, or knowing what's going on. He uses knowing as a verb as opposed to a noun, because it's not about a thing or an object, it's about the process. So he says in your awareness, in awareness, you're happy, peaceful, loving, all those qualities that you're looking for all the time. And if that's who you are, then that's the meditation. Now we have to peel off the things that are going on in the ego that are keeping you from that. And he says it's a natural process if you just come back to just be quiet. When he does his meditations, he closes his eyes for a few minutes and then he opens them and he talks and then he closes his eyes. And he said, leave your eyes open if you want to, or close your eyes. And he also does the transmission of the energy in the silence portions of what he's doing. So today was an hour and a half meditation, and tomorrow we'll do 4.5. And
4.5 hours?
yeah, although it's 2.5 broken up to 2.5, two and 2.5.
Wow.
Yeah. Now it doesn't even feel like meditation in the traditional way where, you're like I've done and you've done in Vipassanas where you're down for the day, these 10-hour meditation things. He says, just let your experiences be what they want to be. That's okay. That's not what we're focused on here. We just want you to follow yourself back to the awareness that is knowing what is going on, and knowing that there's objects out there, and knowing that there's a thought that's passing through. That's different from getting engaged in the thought and following it through into a story, or getting engaged with an object. And he said, because that's putting the objective world out in front, and what you want to do is put that behind. You're always being aware in that peace and love state. That's the state that you are. And he says, there's no personal identity in that place. As we've talked about before, it's like when you go to that place in meditation, there's no personal identity there anymore. It's the oneness.
Yeah, it's funny. You're approaching it this way, and every morning I'm reading 112 different meditation techniques by Osho. Yeah. And I know they're not his. He's just expounding on them. But every one of the techniques that he's talking about gets you to focus on one thing and keep that one focus until it all disappears. And as you described it, get into love, get into this state of the observer. Well, for Osho, that's the state of perfect balance where you disappear. There's no contrast on either side, and you become one with all that is. I'll call that the observer. You can call it God, spirit, whatever it is. But that oneness doesn't know contrast.
Right, yeah.
And that's our natural state.
Yeah. And that's the state, that oneness state that so many traditions are moving you towards. Nothing wrong with any of the traditions. They all have a different process and different techniques for getting you there. He qualifies by saying that most traditional religious or spiritual programs are focused on outward chanting and so on and so forth to get to a point to where then they can bring you back inside. And what he calls his is the direct method, which is what Ramana Maharshi and Krishna Menon and some of the others in India talk about, which is you simply go back to the source. And when you say, who am I? There's no answer. If there's an answer, it's your mind.
Yeah.
And when you go back far enough to the source, you're in the awareness that knows. So that's the technique that he likes to do, and that's what Ramana Maharshi would teach his students as well. Now, a lot of people, I've talked to people at our center, and people go, well, what about karma, and what about reincarnation? And I said, no, that's out there, that's objective. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this particular thing. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have habitual thought patterns that need to be cleared up, which also is what Osho does when he's focusing in on something. He's blowing up those habitual thought patterns, which Joe Dispenza would say, well, you're breaking the neural pathways, and which is also what they do in, what is it called, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is it's similar, is taking and blowing up those thoughts. So when we break up those habitual ways of thinking, we're beginning to blow up parts of the personality. And as we begin to blow up those parts of the personality, ultimately, we should come back to the nothingness.
Yeah.
So all paths lead there.
And it's sort of funny, even doing Wim Hof breathing, just going into that deep breathing, it becomes one focus. And if you really do the one focus on the breath and really understanding, not only are you breathing in oxygen, but you're breathing in life force. And when you're doing that, that's clearing the energy centers in your system so that when you're done with the breathing, it's much easier to go into the state of the observer.
So Wim Hof is he teaching the slow inner breathing and then the rapid outer breathing, or those varying techniques?
He goes with 30 very deep breaths pretty fast. So it's in,
Okay. Yeah.
and you do 30 deep breaths. And then on the exhale, you're going to hold your breath. And let's say you start at 1 minute on the exhale. And then after the 1 minute, you breathe in, you hold it for 15 minutes, you squeeze your belly, squeeze your chest, squeeze your head, pushing oxygen out, and then you release, and then you do another round of 30 deep breaths. Except this time at the end, you hold it for a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And then you do another round. So Gene and I are doing 4 rounds twice a day right now. With the second one, we're actually up to the point where we're working on holding our breath 3 minutes in between.
Ooh, interesting. So some of that sounds familiar in that one of the yogic teachings that I do is breathing rapidly for that 1 minute period.
Yep.
And then it's holding your breath for a short time. I don't know how long exactly. It's like you'll feel it when the shift is happening. And then you move into slow, deep breaths. And then you start humming. And the point of the humming is it reverberates through your whole system. And it's amazing the shift that happens in the energy in the body.
And is it a specific sound that you're humming? Is it like one of the mantras that they give for clearing the frequencies or anything? Or you just start humming?
Yeah, it's just and you do it outside, yeah. And what I notice is if you focus, for me, if I focus on the heart region and I bring the energy in through the heart, as I then hum and let it go, I let it go out from the heart. And my humming frequency goes lower and lower and lower. Yeah. Because the whole body's relaxing more and more and more.
Yeah.
So those pranayama techniques from the various traditions are also, again, another path.
Yeah.
And you can actually break up those habitual patterns of thinking with that same technique.
Yeah.
And it's really what people are looking for, is they're looking for those 3 things of peace, harmony, love, and happiness, or 4 things. And there's so many ways to get to it. They're all bringing you back to that one.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we misunderstand. We think we have to get the next thing out there, and that might bring me the happiness, or the next person out there will bring the happiness, right? And that's, Ernest Holmes was really good at saying, no, that's not what's going to do it for you.
What's interesting is we have a habit of thinking of what a relationship is. And one of the things I'm exploring right now that I'm going to be talking about on Sunday is this idea that love does not hold a relationship together. Mm-hmm. Common purpose does. You start out with the idea of love, which is pure acceptance. That's what the universe is doing. God is purely accepting you, every bit of you as you are. Well, that's great. I can love you, Larry, accept you as you are, but to be in relationship with you, we have to have a purpose that we agree on. And I think a lot of people find that when they get into a relationship, at first, it's like and lust that they get in relationship. Maybe some acceptance comes in, but if they never develop a common purpose or purposes that mutually support each other, where they're both equally benefiting, the relationship will fold immediately.
Well, that probably goes back to the traditions where you get married according to how and who you're supposed to get married to. In India, they do their Vedic charts to see if they're compatible and see if their karmas are supposed to come together in a certain way. And then they get married. Yep. And in the old tradition, I don't know if it still holds today, but in the old tradition, you stayed together for life. And remarkably, most of the stories of those people that I've heard were about the fact that they grew into love and acceptance of the other person over time, which is a very different model than what we have, which is we both tell each other lies to get together, right? And then we get together and the lies blow up and we go, wait, what? That's not who I thought you were. And then we have to work through all that.
And Larry, that habit of marriages being set for their children matched up, that's still happening. That's huge there. Mm-hmm. Not only is it happening there, it's happening with a large part of the Indian population in the United States.
Oh yeah, true.
And I talk with people, and when I talk with them about it, they say, and you look at the data behind it, their rate of staying in marriage is a lot more than ours, where we select it, and that's really fascinating. And yet, my best friend, who's Indian, Niranjan, he didn't follow that path. It was arranged, but he chose not to go that path, and he actually picked his bride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a friend too that I worked with up in Chicago, and he was from a very prominent family in India, and boy, they're very much, this is who you're going to marry no matter what. Well, he didn't. He married an attorney from Chicago that he had met, and they were together 2 years and then divorced.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, oh, well, that didn't work out quite so well. And again, to me, he grew up for the most part in Canada and the United States. So he didn't have the same cultural background that the traditional Indian families do. Even some of them that come here for work.
Yep.
I just down the street from Pfizer, and Pfizer has a lot of people they brought in from India to work here. And they're having these arranged marriages all the time.
And I worked with a young lady who was from India, who was married by parents' wishes, etc., and came here. And it turned out that as she became Americanized, it didn't work for her. Mm-hmm. And for her to go through the process of divorce was very difficult because of the pressure from the families and the shame and the guilt that's thrown upon them. And there was that habitual thinking that we talked about at the beginning coming back. These people have habits. They're not thinking about the happiness of their daughter, the happiness of their sister, the happiness of a friend. They're thinking, this is the way it is. We've got to have that. And even working with this individual, I had to really create a new habit of her thinking so she didn't beat herself up and put herself down.
Right. Yeah, it took a while to, I helped this friend of mine's mother from India understand what was going on and why all this took place. And she says, we're breaking traditions that are, thousands and thousands of years old. And I said, well, let's backtrack for a second. Just because it's thousands of years old doesn't make it right and doesn't make it good, doesn't make it perfect. And so the universe is always changing, and there's all kinds of variables that flow into these things. But helping her understand it was tough because that's a long-term process that they go through. And of course, her marriage was arranged, and she was married 50 years to the same person. Yeah. And she said, well, you don't love each other when you get married. That happens as you grow with each other. And I said, well, I tend to think that's probably true. But
I would agree. There's
other
Larry.
Things that go along with that, and not so traditional in America is, or in the Western world, it's much more traditional for you to fall in lust, or to, and even that's beginning to change now, and the numbers are showing that's changing. You don't have to get married for any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And now we have legal traditions that are just craziness in terms of prenups and all the other things that people go through. It's a world that's changing its own habit. Speaking of which, the world is changing its habit of being a wonderful place with record winter storms. We have magnetic field. The North Pole and South Pole are beginning to shift, which indicates that we're going to have a major shift there, which is the last time the biggest one happened was, I think, 42,000 years ago. And it makes an impact on the weather that is devastating. So there, and also the sun, which is having its issues going on, is throwing more cosmic radiation our way. Without the magnetic field, we get more of that cosmic radiation to individuals, and it changes our personality.
And change is happening. I don't know if you're seeing this faster and faster and faster. And
I
it's
thought
like,
that was just my age.
no, well, maybe it is. Maybe your habit of thinking is getting, but
Not enough time.
I see things happening much faster. You put something out there as a belief, it's happening faster than it's ever happened before. And I don't know if it's the consciousness that we're doing or I don't understand it all, but I do understand that there's a collective consciousness, a group consciousness, which has a habitual way of thinking, and it's demonstrating really fast in the universe. The more polarized we become, that's a habit of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that will demonstrate really fast for those people thinking one way and those people thinking the other. I think we've got to find the people in the middle that are not thinking one way or the other.
Yeah, the polarization is ironic to me because here we have the North and South Pole that are so divergent, and they're beginning to make a swap. And we have people whose belief systems are changing, or they're coming to the surface much more. I think that's probably more accurate. And the world seems very destabilized. And yet, it's not.
Yeah.
It's always been this way.
Yeah. If the world is always changing, we just now, because of technology and instantaneous news, are starting to see the change. But it's always been changing.
Sure, it's always been changing, and we've never heard of somebody being killed over in India on the local news in St. Louis, Missouri, or in Dallas, Texas.
Exactly.
Because nobody heard all of that stuff before. Now, 24-hour news cycles, everybody's looking for the next news item. It could be somebody gets lost in their car in Canada, and it's all over the networks.
I look, just even this cold front that just happened here in Texas, in Dallas, Fort Worth, where I'm at. Record colds got down to zero with a -degree wind chill. It's never been that in 34 years I've been here.
What's it in February normally?
Normally it's maybe 40s during the day, maybe getting down to 25, 30 at night, but that's normally it.
Yeah.
But when this hit, there's all these people without power, all these people without water. But I'm sitting here, God bless, I have power and I have water. Without all this bombardment, I wouldn't know what's going on everywhere else.
Right, yeah. Like my sister lives in Austin, and she was saying today they finally got their power back on.
Yeah.
Well, in the darkest part of it, she lost her power on Sunday. Here it is a Friday. That's 6 days without power. She said the internal temperature in her house was 4 degrees.
That's amazing.
4.
I can't even imagine that.
It's unreal. And she said, luckily we still had gas, and we had a gas fireplace, and we just got our down comforters and we laid in front of the fireplace for 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, and we're here in St. Louis, we got part of that same storm. We got the cold and we got about 6 inches of snow, but we're on the national grid, so we didn't have problems with it. Kansas City, on the other hand, had some problems. I don't know what they were going through, some rolling power outages because of power use. But all of this stuff that churns up in the news is 99% negative. And the more we pay attention to that, the more we put that into our subconscious mind, the more we're going to see more of that.
And that's a habit, isn't it? How we think about it negative.
Absolutely. And it's hardwired.
Yep.
It's hardwired, and it's because we are still primitive in parts of our brain. That's why they call one part of the brain the prehistoric or the reptilian brain, because it's the first part of the brain that developed, and it's got all the survival mechanisms going.
You know, I have community gatherings on Wednesday. I have 4 different ones, 4 different time zones and that. And there will be individuals in my gatherings, and you can tell how the habitual thinking is running, because every week it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Nothing changes. No matter what you say, hey, focus over here, this will change. The habit is it's just gone.
It's grooved into the brain, literally, in neurosciences have shown this, and it's been, 15, 20 years almost that we've had neuroscience that's been able to look at the electrical activity in the brain. And we find those pathways are constantly being utilized over and over.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to me that the electrical impulses will run down those neural pathways before we have the thought that's connected to those neural
Yeah.
pathways.
Yeah.
And that's what habitual thinking really is. It's the brain electrically or chemically induces a thought that's similar to previous thoughts in that way. It's no longer spontaneous kind of thought.
And people wonder why they have the same fight over and over with their spouse. Because the spouse just leaves a glass in the wrong spot, that triggers a habit of thought, and then bam, there's a reaction, and you go, holy hell, what just happened?
Yeah, exactly. And it applies on the macro scale, way out here in politics or in negotiations with other countries, and on the micro scale, on the individual scale with our own mind.
Yeah.
Going, oh, this is going to be great. You dummy, what'd you do that for?
Yeah.
I don't know about your mind, but my mind has a habit of doing
Yes.
that. All right. Well, I think we've run out of time. I don't ever think that we'll run out of things to talk about. All right. So we'll catch you on the next show. And everybody stay warm and be healthy. We'll talk to you later.
Have a great day, everybody.
Beyond Limits. Join us and ask your questions. Check our website for details on our call-in shows. Check beyondlimitsradio.com. That's beyondlimitsradio.com.